in Cinema, we had to be very, we had to create all of our own folders. So every time we wanted a textures folder, an output folder, whatever, we had to create those. In Maya, it automatically will create those, but we have to create our basic folder structure. So on your computer, everyone in here has used a PC before, right? Yes, cool. So on your computer, you have two drives that are main. You have your C drive, which is the local computer drive, and then you have the P drive. The C drive is locked. If you do anything to the C drive, when you reboot, it goes back to normal, or it should go back to normal. So if you save anything to the desktop, then it's just going to revert when you come back to it, okay? So don't save anything to the desktop, don't save anything to the C drive. You're going to save everything of yours to the P drive. So on your P drive, you're going to make a brand new folder. So go to the P drive and make a new folder. You're going to label the folder, oops, this is 20, your last name underscore 2520 underscore W17. Oops. Okay, so we've created the main folder for this. Now, if this was Cinema, what we would do is we would go into that folder and we would create a new folder for the specific project and then subfolders for each additional folder that we need. So we would have one for scenes, one for textures, one for output, all that stuff. So Maya will do all that work for us. So all we need to do is create that main folder and then we're good at that area. So now I want you to go back to the the P drive. And on the P drive, you'll see there's a folder probably called Maya in there. Okay, this is one of the awesome things about Maya is that all of your preferences are right there. Okay, so every preference that you do inside of Maya, if you change something, it'll save it, and then you could take that home and use those same preferences at home. So people who are in industry, they don't just like go to someone's computer and start using it. They typically walk around with their preferences so they could drop them on and work exactly like they want to work. Okay, so if you have a folder here, delete the 2016 X5 folder that's inside the Maya folder. Okay, so open up the Maya folder and delete the 2016.5. If you've opened Maya, you'll have to close Maya and then do that, otherwise it won't let you do it. I'm going to just rename mine because I don't want to delete mine. Okay, so if you needed to, you can close Maya down and then delete the 2016.5 folder. You'll see there's also preferences for like my version of 2016 I have and my version of 2017. When I open up my version of Maya on here, it's going to say, do you want to copy your old preferences? Because it'll recognize that I have another version. I obviously don't want to do that. So now I can open up Maya. So I'm going to open up Maya 2016 extension 2. And there he is. So I'm going to say do not copy the old preferences, just create default ones, just so we're all on the same page.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you can.
I found that in mine I had like an H underscore 2016.5.
That's fine.
Okay, that's fine.
If it's just the regular 2016.5, that's the one you want to delete.
Okay. I've got a new one now for 530.
Yep. There are, like some people will do, like especially in a lab environment, they'll just rename their preferences. So like on mine, I put old. That way I can just delete this folder when I'm done and just get back to those preferences that I already had set up before. Okay? So it's really nice because not only can you back up your file, but you can back up your preferences. And your preferences is more than just like, you know, I set some options here. Your entire workflow can change. There's people who customize their interface exactly the way they want it to so that it works super efficiently. Cool. Am I still recording? Yes, okay. So here is the what's new highlight. So you may get this thing that pops up. I do not need that. I can just say do not show this at the startup and hit OK. All right. And I'm going to maximize this also so that it's bigger. Now, big differences between Cinema and Maya. Maya will hide all the stuff that we're currently not using, right? So whenever we select it on an object inside Cinema, On the bottom right, we would get a bunch of attributes. Here's all the stuff that is about that item. We'd also get on the top right, that's where you had your palettes. Here's all the items that are in my scene. Maya does not have those. We don't use those on a daily basis because the items are just right there inside of our scene, so we can just click on them. It has them, but it hides them until we're ready to use them. This item that's over there on the far right, that's our channel box. So that's what we're going to use to change different values like translate, rotate, and scale. Those items we use a lot inside Maya, so we keep those right there. Down here, these are our layers, okay? And just like Cinema, they are display layers, so we can hide things and show things. That's typically what we would use it for. Over here on the left is all of our selection, moving, and rotating tools. These are our different layouts. Here's our timeline. And then this thing here, this is called the shelf. And if you go to some of the other applications that are 3D, you'll see they have a shelf. And the shelf is super helpful because anything that you think that you may want to use at some other point, you can save to that shelf. If you're constantly going to like the bevel tool, you can put the bevel tool right in your shelf. That way you don't have to constantly hit the button to get to the bevel tool, okay? And you'll see that there's tabs here, which allow us to also switch between all of the different ones, okay? As you download different plugins or as you go out and you get rigs, sometimes you may have other stuff in there. Also, up here at the very top, this is one menu bar. And then over here on the left, we can switch this, and that will actually change which menu bar we're in. So there's a lot of different stuff inside Maya that is hidden. Some of it we'll need right away, some of it we don't need right away. Okay, so we'll kind of baby step our way through it. All right. So the first thing we want to do is we want to finish setting up our project. So we want to tell Maya to create our folder structure so that everything is nice and organized. So under File, go down to Project Window. Okay. So go to File, then go to Project Window. This is going to create all of those folders there. So every one of these folders that you're seeing, all of the names, it's going to create that folder for us inside of a project folder. And the nice thing is, all we have to do is give the project a name, tell it where to go, and it automatically does it. Okay? So we're going to say New. We're going to point it to our P drive folder. Okay, so all I have to do is go right to the P drive folder. That's my name folder. Okay, once you put it on the P drive into your folder, once you've clicked on this and given it a name, so you call it your last name underscore product, then just leave it there for a minute. These are. So there are several folders that you will constantly be using every single time you create a project. So number one is scenes. So in Cinema, anytime we hit the save key, Control S, it would save our scene out. That's our scene. Okay, just like Maya, that's our scene. That's everything that's inside of our 3D environment. So that's probably our most important file that we want to save. So when we hit Control S, Maya automatically knows put this inside of the scenes folder. So it's pretty smart in how it's set up. Whenever we render stuff out, it'll automatically go inside the images folder. Okay, so Maya will automatically render everything right to the images. When we bring textures in, it'll automatically bring textures in from the source images folder. So as we start saving stuff and manipulating stuff and doing all these things, we have to make sure that we put stuff in the right folders so Maya knows where to grab it from and knows where to put stuff. Okay, those are the three main ones that we'll use: scene, images, and source images. The rest of these are used by Maya for its own purposes, like auto-saving. Okay, so there's a auto-save feature I'll show you. Maya will allow us to automatically save stuff every 15 minutes or so, and it puts it into this auto-save folder. If we have a script, it reads it from the scripts folder. We have a sound, it reads it from there. It does some rendering stuff, it saves into that area. Okay, so we can just hit accept. All right, So now we've accepted that. So now we're going to go down to this area. There's a little running man on the far right bottom, and he's being chased by a gear, it looks like. So click on the guy being chased by a gear. Way down here. See it way? Oh, you can't see it. In the bottom right?
I think I see it.
There you go.
Okay.
Is this thing in your way?
A little bit.
Okay.
I'm okay.
I'm looking at getting a table, so I can probably put that back there eventually. So these are the preferences for Maya. And these preferences are things that, you know, in cinema we really didn't mess around with the preferences too much. But now that we're at a little bit higher level, we're going to start messing around with these things. So starting at the very top on the left, if you click on interface, here is just some basic preferences. We're not going to change anything specifically in here, but just so you can see some of these things. They have gestures on here, so like some devices like your touchpad on your laptop, there are gestures that will actually be read by it. There's also stuff like your webcam can be used as a camera, and you can manipulate your 3D environment. So you could like rotate stuff and it'll actually read those kinds of things. It's not very accurate, it's not very efficient, so I don't typically use it, but it's definitely something you could try out if you were bored. Here's the highlight colors, so if I didn't like this green that's around my items that are new, I could change that if I wanted to, or I could turn it off if I don't like it. I like to keep it on though. What else? The view cube, I don't need to see that. Let's go down to settings. I believe that's the next one. Okay. So settings. So everything we render out of here, we want it to be 30 frames per second. Okay. So under the time, switch your time to 30 frames per second. Okay. So where it says settings, time, just change that to 30. And what that does, it gives us a little bit smoother animations. If we went with 24, it might be a little bit jerky if we had a big movement. Okay. Also notice in here that we're working in centimeters. So if we're in centimeters and we're building something, we need to know those dimensions, right? This is something that I printed last semester that I thought was the right size, but obviously that is nowhere near the actual size that I needed because I had the wrong settings on the printer. Okay, so you have to make sure that all of your stuff is locked to the correct settings. So typically we leave this as centimeters, but just be aware that if you do build something and you plan on 3D printing it, that you need to know it's this big in centimeters, right? Or inches or whatever you're using. Also, we can pay attention to this. The up axis is Y. In some programs, it's Z. So if you imported a model or you're exporting a model, sometimes it'll go into another program and it may be rotated. So just be aware that some softwares use Z as their up. All right, so let's see what else we have here. Files and projects. If we go down to files and projects, here's where autosave is. So if you ever worked inside of Cinema and it crapped out on you and you've lost all your work, this is where you could turn on autosave. So right in the center of this, it says autosave enable. So I recommend at least starting off with autosave on. That way you can save your work periodically. So you could say, let me save this every 10 minutes. Okay, and it'll save your work every 10 minutes for you, or 15 minutes, or however often you don't feel like losing your work. Okay, so enable it, set it for 10 minutes, good. I'm going to turn mine off because I don't need it. Snapping sound. So many preferences. Undo, there we go, that's the one I wanted. So there's a specific number of undos that you can undo inside of Maya. Right now the setting is set to 50. If you feel that you need more than 50 undos, then change this number to a higher number. Okay, put it to like 200 or 300. The more undos you have though, the slower your system could run. There's an infinite checkbox here. I would definitely not recommend infinite. That is like a ridiculous amount of undos. It literally saves everything that you do. When you click on an object, then you deselect it, and then you click on something else, that's like 3 undos right there. So I don't do an infinite amount of undos.
Is it like, let's say you save one file, and you go to another file.
Your undos are gone.
So, okay.
Yep. I leave mine at 50. If I have to go back 50, usually it's quicker for me just to remodel something or fix it instead of having to do that. Not always, but a lot of time.
So just leave it at 50?
I would set it to, for a student, I would set it to 200. All right, so I think that's all we want to change. So I'm going to hit save. Yes. There we go. Cool. So how did we rotate our scene around inside of Cinema? Like we want to spin the scene around. Alt and left mouse button. There we go. Alt and left mouse button. So you see that's the same thing inside of Maya. So hold down Alt, left mouse button. Did you have a question, sir? Or was that an answer? Okay. You can just shout it out. Alright, so Alt and left mouse button, we can tumble around our scene or orbit around our scene. And then how did we pan around our scene inside of Cinema? Middle mouse button, right? So Alt and middle mouse button. So it doesn't feel too different yet, right? Alt and right mouse button will be our zooming in and out, okay? So far those 3 things are very similar to Cinema, but then we obviously will get a little bit different. So let's go and create something. So under the create menu at the top left, you'll see it says create, and then there is a bunch of items here. So just for fun, let's just go to create polygons and just create any one of those items inside that list. Okay, so go to create polygon primitive and then pick an item. The helix is the best one in there.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Clicking one of these shapes do the exact same thing, or?
There we go. So this is the helix. So when we created an object inside here, you'll see that on the far right it says P helix 1. There's translates, there's rotates, there's scales, and there's visibility. And that's the information all about that specific item. If we switch to the move tool, which if you look at your hotkey sheet is what hotkey? W. You'll see that we get the similar-ish interface, right? We still get arrows just like we had with Cinema. And the same thing, we never want to just grab this and move it. That's always a no-no. You want to grab the arrows exactly on them and move it that way. Okay? And as you start moving something, you'll see that the translates over there are moving also. Okay? So now we can reset this. So if I click and drag on all 3 of these and hit 0, it pops it back to the beginning. Okay? That's something you commonly want to do. This area right here at the origin, just like in Cinema, just like in any 3D program, as you model something, you want to keep everything right there. It makes the world a lot easier if everything is modeled right around the origin. So if we accidentally move something away from this, we always want to just go back and reset it. Okay? All right, now what is the rotate hotkey? E. So now we go to E, and then we can rotate this guy around. And then we can go and reset it once we're done. And then what's the scale hotkey? R. So you see move, rotate, and scale, W-E-R, are right next to each other. So as long as you remember move, rotate, scale, then you know that move, rotate, scale is W-E-R. Okay. Cool. What else? Okay, so if you remember in Cinema, there were some options that we could set, right? So when you created an object, in the bottom right section, it would say how many subdivisions do you want, how many size of this do you want this thing to be as an initial piece of object. So that's where this input comes in. So way over here on the right, it says polyhelix. Click on the word polyhelix. And you'll see that these have those same options, okay? Or whatever your object is. If you have a cube, then you click on cube. So these have the same options. Now, as I hover my mouse over any of these things here, it turns into this bar with 2 arrows. Anytime it does that, that means it's a slider. So if I were to just click and drag, it automatically adds to that or changes it, right? Same thing with the height.
What are we supposed to click again?
Right on the polyhelix or whatever one you pick there.
Okay.
Where'd you go? There you are. Uh-oh. Still on that? No, my mouse just freaked out a second. Okay. So you see very quickly we can adjust these things. Now, unlike Cinema, if we want to change the shape of this, we don't have to hit like the make editable button or hit C or anything. Everything inside Maya is automatically editable. So if we want to, we can edit the vertices or edit the faces or edit the edges of this. Now inside of Cinema, we would go over here to the left side and we would click on vertices, or we click on edges, or we click on faces. In Maya, there's a hidden menu, okay? So with your item selected, I want you to hold down the right mouse button right on top of your item. Okay? And when you hold the right mouse button down right on top of the item, you'll see there's edges, there's vertices, or there's faces. Whoops. So if we want to grab faces, just let go of your mouse on the word face, and then you can grab faces. And then you can go to your move tool and you can move stuff around. Awesome. And you can make some very trippy looking artwork, especially with the helix. Cool. Alright, so now we're in face mode. We've edited some of these faces, moved them around. You can do the same thing with the vertices. You can do the same thing with the edges. So now we want to get back to the regular mode and grab the entire object. So you do the exact same thing. You hold down the right mouse button right on your object, and then you would go to object mode, which is in the top right. Okay? Now, did you notice a color change between object mode and component mode? What was the color of the components? Blue, right? With like little purplish things. And then the color of the object? Green. So pay attention to that, because it's very easy to miss that and you're like freaking out. As an example, this is what we get a lot. So I grab a plane. I'm going to make this huge. Okay, so let's say I select this, and then I right click and I go to vertices. And then I try to grab this. And I'm like, why isn't it grabbing it? Do you see what it's grabbing down here? It's grabbed the face or the vertex of that plane because I clicked on the wrong thing. Okay? So you have to make sure you click right on the object and then go to that, and then you can select it, and then you can move it, and then you can go back to object mode. Okay? Cool. Now the other way that you can get in and out of that mode is by hitting F8. Okay, so not F and 8, but just the F8 key at the top of your computer. Okay, so if you just hit F8, it goes into the mode. You hit F8 again, it comes out of the mode. So this is object mode, component mode. So just so you get used to it, just hit F8, just so you can see what it does. And then do it really fast. There you go. Okay, now this mode is extremely helpful when you have, let's say, 10 items that you want to grab all of their stuff. Okay, if I had 10 items, I don't want to right click on each one and go to vertex, vertex, vertex. I want to hit F8 with all of them selected, grab their stuff, and then move it to wherever I need to move it to. Okay, so I'll use both. I'll use F8 and I will use the right clicky button. Cool. All right, so we know how to create objects. We know how to do that. Let's go to some of the tools. So at the very top of our menu, you'll see that there is a modeling menu set. Okay, so on the very top left by my light, it says modeling. So make sure yours says modeling too. It's like way up there. All right, most of our time initially while we're modeling will be spent in the modeling menu set. Surprise. There's several different menus that we would jump into. Okay, now I'm going to show you a quicker way to do these. But for now, you can go to Mesh Tool and you can go to Insert Edge Loop. Okay, so go to Mesh Tool, Insert Edge Loop. Now, do you see what color our object changed when we went to Mesh Tool, Insert Edge Loop? Blue. So that means what mode are we in? Component mode, right? So in Cinema, you have to go to that menu. You have to go to Edges, and then you have to go to the tool. In Maya, it knows you're doing this tool, you probably want to be in this mode.
Wait, so are we supposed to be in component mode or?
Yeah, you're going to be in component mode. Okay? So now I want you to click and drag along one of your edges. Okay? You can go all over the place. It doesn't matter. Just put a bunch in. Okay? Does this look familiar at all? Right? Remember the loop tool or the knife tool inside of Cinema?
Yeah.
We use that to insert edges. That's what we're doing here.
Oh,
Okay?
I get it.
So it's the same exact tool. It's just a matter of it's only used for that. Okay? It's only used to add edge loops. Now if you jump back up to the mesh tool again, you'll see there's one called the multi-cut. So you can click on multi-cut.
Under mesh tool?
Yep. Now if you zoom in a little bit closer so you can see it, and you just click on an edge point, or on an edge, and then you click on another edge, and then you click on another edge, you'll see how then we can draw a line that we want to specify. So with the multi-cut, we're just clicking exactly where we want that shape to be. And then we can hit enter when we're done. Okay? So in Cinema, they were one tool that you would just pick from a different option menu. Inside of Maya, there's several different tools. Okay? And you'll see that it's kept me inside of component mode, so I can just right click and hold, go to object mode, and now I'm back to object mode. And I'm going to delete this huge mess. That's disgusting. And I'm going to create something a little bit simpler. So delete your huge mess. Make sure you're in object mode when you delete. It won't let you delete in component mode. Okay? And then just create a cube, just a simple cube. Okay? So I want to see how well you can do this without me telling you exactly where it is. I want you to click on one of these edges and put a bevel on it.
Yeah, you did it. You're facing it straight on.
Okay?
Yeah, I know.
So if you grab an edge, so I went right clicked and I grabbed an edge. I went up to edit mesh, and you'll see that there's a command called bevel. Okay? Now commands are different than tools. Tools we have to interact with. So a lot of the stuff inside Cinema was a tool, meaning that we have to do something once we had it. With this, we can just click on it and it'll do that tool. Okay? So I clicked on the edge, I went to edit mesh, and then I went to bevel. Now this is a nice thing about Maya that I really like, is it'll typically bring up this little box. And that box gives you kind of like the highlights of here are the most popular things that people will do with this tool. One of them is fraction. So what do you think fraction is talking about? Correct. How much of the object to bevel? So if you look at the size of this edge here to here, this number is 0.5. So it's actually cutting this in half this way and in half that way, and that's how far it's going, right? So if I want this to be a sharper bevel, what should I do with this number? Make it tinier, right? So it's at 0.5, so 0.05 makes it super tiny, okay? If I tried to go to 1, it would probably go all the way to that edge, and the same thing on the other side. Now if I wanted to make this, if I want to make it smoother, what should I edit? Segments. What'd you do? Oh, you did 5, not 0.05. Okay, so you're exactly right. So then we could add more segments inside here. Okay, now if this was cinema, every change that we would do is basically like locked in once we click off of this. We can't go back and edit stuff, okay? But I'll show you inside Maya how we can do that. So I'm going to grab the opposite edge, and I'm going to add a brand new bevel to this. So go ahead and add a brand new bevel to the other side. And maybe this one's not as tight, and maybe it has a few more segments. There we go. I'll make it really obvious, 0.25. Okay, so I have one corner that has a pretty sharp bevel, one corner that has a pretty rounded bevel. Like I said, if this was cinema, we would basically be stuck. We couldn't go back to that original one and change any of the stuff because it doesn't save that information. But inside of Maya, it does save that information. So I'm going to go back to object mode. So I just right click and go back to object mode. And then over here in the channel box, you'll see that it remembers everything that I've done. If you lost your channel box, on the top is where we could turn that on. So this button right here on the very top right allows us to turn on that channel box. Okay, it's the little narrowy one that has this stuff in there. On the very top right, Ashley. Keep going, one more. Right there, yep. Cool. So all of this stuff right here, where it says polycube, polybevel, polybevel, that's everything that I've done to this surface. So if I want to go back to even like my polycube original shape, and I want to change something like the width, you can see how I can still do that original width or that original depth. Or I can go back to that original bevel and change that fraction. Okay, and you'll see how everything in that updates, which is pretty nice because we're able to still tweak it. Some things we cannot do, okay? So every edge and every vertex and every face inside of Maya is numbered. We can't see it right now, but they are numbered. So if I tried to go to my original cube and I tried to add new divisions to this, oops, there we go, you can see what happens to my bevels. Because Maya remembers you beveled edge 4 and edge 6. Well, now edge 4 and 6 are right here. They're not where I used to have them. Okay, so I can't do things like adding divisions, but I can definitely change some of the stuff. Okay, now all of these things that I'm editing over on the side and all the stuff that Maya's saving is called history. And so Maya will save every single thing we do. If I go and open up, do I have anything? Do I have anything? Work. Environment. There we go. This is a scene I worked on last semester if it decides to open. There it goes. Would you like to use run domain? Sure. There it is. So if I click around my scene somewhere inside here, oh my gosh, I didn't save any of that. Well, anyway, I'll just go to any one of my objects here, like this one. Okay, so for this specific object, you can see if I zoom in close, there are some edge loops that I've added to this. There's some scaling that I did to this. There's some bevels that I've added to this. Especially way down here, you can see there's some extrusions that I've even done to this surface. So originally when I created this list over here was huge. There's probably like 20 or 30 things inside that list of stuff that I've done to this object. So you don't typically need to save that, but it is good to have it in case you need to go back and tweak it. Okay. So there's an option called delete history. So if I go into this and let's say that I insert an edge loop right here and here, and then I grab these faces and I go to extrude and I pull this out. And then I do that and then I bevel this. Okay, so here's 4 things that I just did to that. So it's kind of neat to be able to go back and edit those if I need to. If I realize that this band is maybe too small or too big, I can go back to those original splits that I did and maybe change them. So instead of 0.738, maybe I put this to 0.8. It'll be huge. Or it just moved up some. 0.5. There we go. Now it's huge. Okay, so I can go back and edit that, or if I need to, I can go back to that original extrude and maybe pull it out further. Okay, so in some cases, in this case obviously that would be ridiculous, but in some cases it definitely is a handy thing to be able to go back and edit this stuff, but for most things we don't need to hold on to it. So there are ways that we can delete history right here, delete by type and history. Okay. So I'm not going to save this. Save that. I'm just going to remake my cube. Yes, ma'am.
How do you add divisions again? Because I'm not able to do it.
Hold on one sec. Divisions to your bevel.
Yeah.
You should be able to go to your bevel and then just type in the division. So over here on the right, see where it says poly bevel?
Oh, okay.
And then you can go to the segments. Right? Alright, so now let's look at this other thing. So in Cinema, if you wanted to see something smoothed out, there's certain hotkeys you could use, but they were typically you would just subdivide it, right? You would go to subdivision surface and you would put it inside there. So inside of Maya, you can hit 3 on the object and it would show you what that object looks like when it's all smoothed out. Okay? So if you hit your object and you hit 3, that's what it looks like when it's nice and smooth. Now, it probably doesn't look great because there's no good structure to it. It's just like a big blob, pretty much. And especially on mine, I have these like weird ribs. Okay? I'm just going to put this here.
What are you doing?
I'm just doing this. I just want to see what that looks like. There we go. That looks much better. Now look at the other side. I'm not going to tell you. Okay, so 3 gets us into that smooth mode, and then 1 takes us out of that smooth mode. Okay, so it's common that we'll work in both modes. We'll hit 3 just so we can see it, and then 1 to get back. Very similar to Cinema, except in Cinema we would uncheck that box for the subdivision surface, and then work on it, then check it, and turn it back on and off. So 1 and 3 are 2 buttons that I constantly are hitting. If you hit 2, you get the best of both worlds. You get to see what it looks like in rough mode and see what it looks like in smooth mode. Some people find this very confusing, but sometimes it helps to be able to see what both versions look like. Okay, I typically work in 3, but as a beginner, definitely work in 1 and preview in 3. Okay, so we have 1, 2, and 3, our other hotkeys. Here's 4. 4 allows us to see the wireframe. That was another thing inside Cinema that was always tricky to get to. 4, boom, right there. We have to hide it. 5 will let us see what it looks like in shaded mode. And then 6 is textured. There's no textures right now. And then 7 is lighting. Okay? So I'm just going to hit 6 back on my thing just so the lighting doesn't show up. Okay? So there's no lights on my scene, so I don't see them. There's no textures in my scene, so I don't see them. Okay? Inside of Maya, your scenes can get so packed with geometry and stuff that you don't want to overload it. That's why we have the ability to go to wireframe or just shaded, or in this case textured, and then or in that mode. So let me jump to my other scene real quick just so you can again see what these modes would look like. Yes. Okay. So these are all textures. These are all things that were painted inside of Mari. So if I hit 5, I don't see any of those textures. I see color. This is just red color back here, but I don't see this texture. If I hit 6, the textures pop back in. If I hit 7, I don't think I have any Maya lights in my scene. Let me just create a Maya light real quick. There we go. And now we can see the lighting in the room. Okay. Now it's just preview lighting, so it's nothing, you know, fancy or anything. So just preview. Jump back to a new scene. Don't save. Okay. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those hotkeys. We have WER that we've used. Okay. So let's play with some other tools here. Delete your cube and then let's create a sphere. Okay, so I want you to practice extruding and then beveling and then inserting edge loops, because that's going to be a huge thing on our first assignment, is just those 3 tools. And if you remember from at least my class when I taught it, there's 3 or 4 tools or 5 tools that you'll constantly use. Beveling, inserting edge loops, extruding, those are the things that you're always going to use. That Pokemon guy I showed you, that's pretty much all I used. I did do some moving around of points, but mostly that's all I did. So right click and go to face on your big sphere. Okay. Now inside of Cinema, and I hate to keep comparing it, but I just want you to see the comparison just so you know where these new tools are. We would have to go to select and do like an edge loop or an edge ring in order to select everything around. In Maya, you can just click on one face, hold shift and double click the one next to it, and it automatically will loop around. Okay. And then you could do that for several different spots. So for this specific Pokemon ball test thing, I'm just going to grab maybe like every other line like that. That looks kind of neat. There we go. Now to extrude, you can hit Control E. That's the hotkey for it. Bless you. That's the easiest way to do that, is just hit Control E. Now inside of here, it already extruded. So when we hit Control E or we go to the extrude, it automatically extrudes the item. You'll see we have these arrows here. The only one we typically will use is the blue one. So I'll grab the blue one and just push it in. Okay, so I grabbed every other face, I went to extrude, and then I pushed it in. Alright, then once you've extruded that, then you can practice right-clicking going to edge, and then just like in Cinema, you would have to go to the edge loop ring tool. Inside Maya, you just double-click the edge, and it automatically will loop all the way around. So then you can just shift, double-click each edge going around. Control E, and then you just grab the blue arrow and push it in. Or pull it out, whichever way you want to go.
And then we just do shift, double click to get the whole edges around the thing.
Yep, you just have to hold down shift and just double click each edge as you go around. Um,
Thanks.
so this is a common thing inside Maya, and this is why I like having the history on it, because then we can actually see what people have done to their surfaces. Inside Cinema, it's a little bit more difficult to see. So if I grab a face like this, and I go to extrude it, oops, like that, I have extruded this face even though I haven't pulled it away from where it's at. Okay, the fact that this arrow is up and it says extrude right here, that means I've extruded this surface. So if I click off of this, there's actually a face right here, and then at each one of these edges there's another face, and I can prove that by clicking on this face and then pulling it away. So you see how these are like tucked into that. So if I were to try to put a bevel on this, Maya freaks out and doesn't know what to do because there's basically faces, it doesn't know how to calculate a bevel, so it just freaks out. So if I were to try to go into this right now and click these and add a bevel, you see I get nothing. So then I would say, okay, well I should have gotten something because I know that when I click an edge and I do a bevel, I should get a bevel, and I don't. So then I can go back and analyze and say, oh, there's an extrude I did. So this is where your undos come in handy. So you can undo until you realize, oops, I accidentally did an extrude on there. Let me undo the extrude, and then I can go ahead and put my bevel on, and now my bevel will work correctly. Okay, so that's why it's nice to have 200 undos for beginners, because obviously you may have to go back 200 times. The other way that we could do that, let's say I extrude this out and I don't actually move it. Okay, so I do have a face right there. Remember inside Cinema, sometimes we'd have to grab all the vertices and we'd have to optimize the surface so that it would basically merge the vertices together that are on top of it. We're going to do that. So I grab all of my vertices, I go to Edit Mesh, and I say Merge. And then what this does is any vertices that are on top of each other, it automatically will merge them together. So now if I grab the face and I move it away, it's one face now. It doesn't have an extra face underneath. So now my bevel should work, and it does. Okay, so those kinds of things we'll figure out later on. We'll be a little bit more able to do that kind of stuff. For now, your biggest thing is just kind of working on getting reliability in your selections, reliability in what you're doing, so that when you extrude, you mean to extrude and you actually pull it out. I use wireframe a lot whenever I'm selecting stuff, because if I go in here and I marquee this face and then I extrude it, and then oops, look at that. I accidentally selected something way on the back. Because I marqueed it, it selects right through it. So what I will typically do, there we go, is if I select something, I'll go into wireframe and spin around. And that way I can see, okay, I didn't mean to select anything back here. I can just deselect that. And now I have that item selected. Alright, so now let me show you some other stuff we can do with this extruding. Oops, right here. So let's say that I want to just add a little port right there. So there's like maybe a little viewing area. I'm going to extrude this. Underneath this offset, that's way too big. 0.05, still way too big. 0.01, that's cool. Oops, I did it again. I said I check it and I didn't check it. There we go. So I'm going to extrude that. I'm going to set this offset to 0.01. That's good. I'm going to extrude it again. I'm going to push it in just a hair. Extrude it again. Push it in just a hair. There we go. So now I have like this little viewing area inside that area. Okay. Now I could extrude this even further. You'll see that when I hit this, when I hit 3 on this, this area is pretty smooth, right? You can see how smooth it softens it up to. If I grab these faces again and I extrude it again and I push it in just slightly, just a little bit, and then I do it maybe even one more time, and I'll even offset it 0.01. now look how tight this area is. Like now I can actually see there's an actual like little bevel happening right there. So I'll sometimes use bevels in these areas, and sometimes I'll use just extrusions, which are essentially bevels in those areas. And just to kind of illustrate that a little bit on a simpler form, so if I grab this face and if I bevel it, and let's say I put 2 segments here, there we go, okay? So all the bevel did was it just added this division and that division. So if I'm at this face right here and I extrude it and I pull it out a little bit and I change the offset a little bit, that's too much, and then I extrude it again, I do another little offset on it and another little movement out, you'll see I get very similar results than the other side. Yes, ma'am.
Could you get a similar result by adding like edge loops in?
Yep, and that's the other one that I was going to mention.
Oh, sorry.
So if, no, you're good. So the other way that I could do this is that if I hit 3, you can see how rounded that is. I can just go to my edge loops and just add a couple edge loops right here. And because we're going to hit 3, it's automatically going to kind of sharpen that edge right there. Okay? So yes, that's another way that we could do that. Even after the fact, we could come in and scale this down. Bevels are nice because when you have a surface like this, you really can't do a whole lot of adding different edge loops and extruding each one of those things. For this little tiny viewing area, it works out perfect. Okay. Now if I wanted to square off these corners here, like you can see how rounded these corners get, I could even grab just these here. I'm just double clicking those. And I'll swing over to this side. Oops, right there. Oops, right there. I'll add a bevel. Maybe 1. Maybe that should be good. There we go. So now I've squared off those corners a bit more, so now it looks like it's a bit sharper, so it looks like it's more like a window. Now we do get some funky stuff in the corners. Like you can see that this area doesn't look perfectly round. But once there's a texture on there, you know, it shouldn't look too horrible. We may have to fix some of the stuff if we decided to use that. We are getting something weird right there. Yeah. There we go, that's better. Sometimes when you bevel, it just looks weird and you actually get like a double face. You can see this tiny circle. It shouldn't be there.
Can you dissolve it?
You just delete them. That's the best part. Just click on that and just delete it. You know, like garbage from some. There we go.
No.
No, just messing around. All right, so that looks much cleaner than it did a minute ago. Okay, so now go through your surface and just grab different areas and do some extrusions on them just to create little pockets or little viewing areas, whatever you want to call them. All right, so those steps I want you to continue working on over break. So if you do download Maya, do this again. Do extruding, do beveling, do inserting edge loops, just over and over and over again. The more time you spend on those 3 tools and the more comfortable you are with those and the least mistakes you make, the better your product will turn out when you get to that point. So what I want to do is I want to take your product wherever it is and then go through a little bit of the rendering process just so you can see how in Maya, how texturing is a bit different and then how lighting is a little bit different too. Okay? So if you were to click, let me just check mine real quick. Yeah. If you were to click on this button right here, which is the rendering current frame button, it's this little clapper, like the movie clapper thing right there. If you click on that, it'll render your frame out. Okay, so just for fun, click on that. So it looks like everyone's is opening up inside of the regular Maya renderer. Okay. Let me close mine and then let me set up mine so that mine does the same thing that yours is doing, so we all know we're on the same page. Cool. So you get something similar to like this when you render it. Okay. So we want to render through a software called RenderMan. Maya's default renderer, when we click that button and it does all the calculations, is very primitive and it can't do certain things. It can't do like realistic lighting or realistic shadows or realistic reflections or any of that stuff. And surprisingly, I guess they just haven't ever updated it, but there's so many other packages that I guess they don't need to. So if you, inside this window, if you click, you should be able to pick a different renderer. So if you see RenderMan in that list, grab RenderMan. If you don't see RenderMan in that list, we have to go load it and then we can see it. Okay?
How do we get to it?
You click on this clapper here,
Okay.
and that brings up this window. And then you can pick on RenderMan if it's listed. If it's not listed, we're going to load it. Okay?
Not listed.
It's not listed?
No.
Okay. So under Window, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager. So anytime something isn't working or isn't loaded inside Maya and you can't find it, the Plugin Manager is usually where it's at. There's so many different things inside of Maya that it basically shut off all the stuff that you typically don't need. So everything is inside the Plugin Manager if you want to load it. So way down in this list should be a RenderMan button. If you look,
What does it say? Plugin manager.
Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now way down at the bottom-ish, there'll be one that says Pixar RenderMan for Maya.
Yeah.
Okay, we have that one. Cool. Okay, so you're just going to click Loaded, and then that should load your RenderMan stuff.
Close that window.
Yep, you close that window when you're done. I'm going to load it on this one.
So we just click loaded.
Yep. Just load it on the one that says RenderMan for Maya.
Gives you the spinning wheel.
Does it?
Oh, it did. It's on there now.
Okay. It may take a second for it to load. Now, if you click auto load, that means that every time you boot Maya up, it'll automatically load it. Regular load is just for this iteration.
So do we select the render view type, it shows two RenderMans now. Yeah.
What do you mean?
RIS and RIS.
Just regular, let me see which one.
Both have an extension. Yeah.
Right, I gotta check this one. Because mine's the most recent. You want Riz. That's what you want. Okay. When you get the other one, it's much more simple. There's only like one option for each one. So hopefully by the time we get back from break, that one will be loaded. And if not, we'll just have it here and you can just install it real quick. It takes like 2 minutes to do. Okay. So what you're going to do is we're going to close that render view. And every one of our options is going to be under the RenderMan menu. So you should have now a RenderMan menu at the top of your screen. And it may look different than mine slightly. I don't think that area does. Yeah, well, that's a little bit different, yeah.
Which RenderMan do we click?
Riz.
Oh, yeah.
So you're going to go to RenderMan Lights, and you're just going to create a standard area light. In mine, it's called a rectangle light. Yeah, under RMS lights, and then go to Pixar standard area light.
I see it.
And the map light.
Alright, just so you can see how this would work in RenderMan 21, so that if you do download Maya and you do download RenderMan over the break, over the whatever, the extra day off. It's a break, right? A break from me. You can just see how the settings are a bit different. Put that there. This raised up a little bit more. There we go. Okay. So under this RenderMan, the lights, there's this many lights on here. There's a lot more lights. So a nice little light setup is to do a dome light, which is basically just like a big sphere. Okay, so I have a nice sphere that's inside my scene. Now when I render this, it's going to go like crazy bright. Okay, so it's like too white in my scene, so I'm just going to hit escape. Hit discard, sure. And then I'm going to take this dome light's intensity down. So look to, that might be too much, 0.1. There's also a color, so you can actually put different colors inside your object. So if your lights are more like a yellowish tint or a bluish tint, you could add those into your scene too. There's also settings for your shadows, so you can even change the shadow color. Like especially if we still had snow from the other night and you looked outside, you would see that the shadows on the snow were not like black shadows, they're actually like blue shadows. So stuff like that is important when you're trying to like re-emulate the realistic world. There's also light filters, there's advanced stuff, so much stuff in here you don't need to play with all of it. The basic stuff is right there. That's why it's called basic. Then I would add a rectangle light as well. And I use my rectangle light as basically my real light. Like if this was an actual scene, what am I lighting this scene with? And so I put a light about here, make it kind of big. Okay, it's pretty dark still, so I'll take the intensity up to maybe like 20. The hotkey for rendering inside here is just R. So you just click in there and hit R and it renders for you. So that looks like a pretty nice lighting setup. We have some good background lighting, so it's not like super dark. It has a nice fall off there. We can still see our shadow, and that looks pretty sweet. So we'll just hit escape. And then I'll add a material to this. So I'm going to go to this guy, go to my materials, and you'll see they have these 3 down here, which I haven't had a use for yet. And then they have these 2. So the layering one, we're not there yet. And then the surface one is like all those other ones combined into one. So when you go to that, it'll show you, let me shrink everything here. There we go. So here is diffuse, which is basic color. So like what's the basic color you want this thing to be? Like let's say I want this to be blue. So I go to blue. Put a better blue right there. Okay. And if I were to render it out, it would basically just be a flat blue, just like a no shininess blue, and that's what we get. Okay. If I want to start adding some other stuff to it, like specularity, I could go to specular. And in here they have 2 different ones. One is artistic, so it's not physically accurate. The other one is physical, which is closer to being physically accurate. So if I click on that one and I crank the edge color up, you'll see that I start to get a reflection inside here. So it's only like one slider really that I'm playing with is that one. And then I can come over here and hit R again. And now I'm going to start to get some reflection on top of this. Okay. And then I could turn that off. I can go down to, actually, I'm not going to turn it off yet. I'm going to go to advanced. Oops, sorry, not advanced. I'm going to go right here to roughness and set this higher. So the higher the roughness is on any of these, it's going to take whatever value it is and start to soften it out, like blur it out. So you'll see that the little icon here that showed a nice crisp highlight when this was at 0.2 right there is now softened out to the point where you really can't see a whole lot there. So I'll hit R again to render it out. And now this does have a highlight, but it's so diffused or so spread out that we don't really notice it much. Now this is another nice thing about RenderMan. It saves every one of these things. Unless we close the view, every one of the renders that we've done has been saved. I can use the arrow keys and go back to the previous one and then look at the next one. So that way I can kind of compare and see which one do I like better. I really like this little highlight that's coming here, and that's kind of gone at this point. So maybe I find a mid-ground between the two that I like better. Okay, so that's maybe like 0.5 or so. And then I can come down to, let's say, clear coat, and again I could add a physical clear coat on top of this. And what this is going to do is give just another level of specularity on top of the other specularity. So think of like a car. There's actually like paint, and then there's like a shininess that happens on top of the car. So that's what we're seeing here. We have one that's kind of like a diffused color, then this other one that's more of like a glaze or something on top of it. Okay, and again, we could play with the roughness to help soften that out too. We could also play with the color. So any one of these, we can click on the color and tint it to something else. So just to make it obvious, we'll tint it to that color. Okay, so now it's a little bit more obvious as to what that item is doing. Sometimes on purpose, I'll do that just so I can see what is this actually affecting. Because sometimes it's difficult to see what is this one attribute doing to my object by making it an obvious color, I can see exactly where it's contributing. So then I could go into this and give it, you know, a proper coloring. Something like that, okay? Just it's blue, but it's a little bit lighter blue. There's also glass right here. And if I crank this glass up like this, and I render it, what we're going to see is that this glass isn't going to look like glass. It's going to look very odd. And one of the reasons for that is because we have other stuff that's affecting it right now. We have the reflection that's affecting it, and we have the diffuse that's affecting it. Okay? So if I were to go to my diffuse and I turn the gain off, and then I render this out, we'd probably get a much more convincing glass. Not too much. I don't know where this big white thing's coming from. That might be from the... Oh, it is my light. Yep. Thank you. Where did I put it? Right in front, probably, too. Yeah, it was right there. Yeah, so that's my light refracting in there. So I'd have to turn that off or soften it or pull it way back or whatever. But that glass is looking 10 times better being in a little environment and using this material as opposed to like the older one inside there. All right, so that's pretty sweet. And again, I can go through and cycle all the way back to my original image to see how far that stuff has come. All right, let's close that. Let's close that. Let's save this. All right, so hit Control S to save your file. Now, what it should do is it should bring you to like your main folder. We want to put this in the scenes folder. Over here on the left, that's where our scenes folder exists. So we want to make sure we click on scenes and then we give it a name. So this is just screwing around. So call it your last name underscore screwing around underscore 01. Okay. That way, in case you're curious, like what did we do the first day, you can pull up the screwing around file and see what we did the first day. All right. So make a new file after you're done. So save that and then just hit Control N to make a new file. And what I want to do is I want to just get you started on how the Pokemon thing is going to go, how we're going to set this thing up. Okay. So looking at the image that we have, desktop 25, 20.
Save and then create a new one.
Where's the other one at? There we go. Okay, so looking at something like this one here or that one there, that's actually a better view of it. Okay. What I want to do is kind of break down how this was created. So if we look at it, it's actually like several pieces put together. It's not just like out of one object. So if you look at this shape, it looks like this top cap is just one shape, right? And it looks like the bottom cap is exactly like the top cap, right? So what shape should we start off building the surface from? Sphere, right? That's like the obvious one. So let's go back to Maya and let's create a sphere. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to create a this little bump right here, right? So we created a sphere and we need to create that bump right there. So do you think we'll be able to grab the faces here and delete those so that it looks like that bump?
No.
No. What should we do? It's right there, right?
Oh.
Right? Like if we look at that circle, that's what it is. So all we have to do is rotate this thing down and then just delete some parts of it. Okay? Now before we start deleting though, we have to keep in mind what this looks like. This is actually a pretty perfect sphere, right? If we were to look at this head on, where's my pointer? This area here wouldn't be like where this stops, right? This actually looks like a perfect sphere that goes all the way around. So what I want to do is add another couple divisions going around just so I have a tighter area. Now before you do it, I want to show you exactly what I'm talking about so it makes a little bit more sense. So I'm going to duplicate the sphere and pull it over here, and then I'm just going to delete these faces there. Okay. So if I take this like this and I duplicate it and I rotate it around, there you go. And then I push this up because I have a division here. Do you see how this is no longer rounded? Because now I've separated the two halves, right? That looks odd. So what we want to do is we want to add enough divisions here where it doesn't look as odd, okay? So that way we have a little bit more refinement. So we're going to go to the polysphere and we're just going to add, I think it's a subdivision axis. Yep. So we're going to add maybe like 60 to the subdivision axis. We may have to type it in. Yes, we do. Okay, so I went to that subdivision axis, I typed in 60, so now we have plenty that are right there. What that was?
I hope so. It's something bad. Inputs. Polysphere. You
Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to delete all the faces around this thing from one side to the other. So if we go like this, just so you can see it, and I shift double click this, there's a good chance that I'll probably deselect the wrong ones. Like, if I can select this. Like this, like those aren't even, right? So obviously that's a bit more tricky to do. It's much easier to jump to a different view and then do it from there. So if you hold down the space bar, this will bring you open into what's called the hotbox. And if you hold your left mouse button down right on the word Maya, that will let you choose different views. So I want to go to the front view. So I'm going to hold down the space bar. Okay. My mouse is stuck. There we go. Hold down the space bar, hold down your left mouse button right on the word Maya, and go to front.
And we have to be on faces, right?
Yes. And now I can marquee straight across this area. And then just delete all those bottom faces.
You said space bar, Maya, and what?
Left mouse button, right on the word Maya, and then go to the front view. Okay, so that will delete all the faces from the front and the back of this. Okay, so cool. So now we can delete the portion that would be for this. Now, I don't believe that the other side of this has that same thing. I think the other side is just a closed surface, and the front piece is where this is at. So if we look at this, you know, we can kind of debate as to where this should end up. Like if you wanted, I think this other one, I don't know, one of them I think had a bigger eye. Maybe I didn't have that one in here. Or maybe I'm thinking of that guy. I don't know. Yeah, this one had a bigger one, okay? So depending on how big you want to go with this is up to you. So I'm going to go with kind of like a smaller shaped eye. So I'm going to just click on one of these faces, hold shift, double click, and then delete it.
It's not going to grab the back.
It will not grab the back doing that.
Okay.
Okay? And then you'll see that I have like a little rainbow here. If you just double click that piece, it'll only select that piece, and then I can delete that piece. Okay, so now we should be able to go through and duplicate this thing. So I'm going to go to, actually let me see, do I want to duplicate that yet? Which one am I using? This one?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, we don't want to duplicate it yet, because eventually what's going to happen is we're going to have this top piece is going to be the exact same thing as the bottom piece. So why duplicate it now when we just have to do that later? That is one nice thing I really like about Cinema, is that we can work with that symmetry and just have that symmetry on all the time, so that we just like click it on, click it off to see it. Maya does not have something like that. So we need to create some thickness here to this shape. Now I'm assuming that this piece here and that piece there are kind of like two different pieces, okay? Like one is maybe like a little lip that locks in with the other one. It's not necessarily needs to be part of that same shape, okay? So we need to add thickness to this, but we also need to keep in mind what we talked about before, is that this edge right here shouldn't really match up with the other one, right? So if I scoot this up and I duplicate it, I'll have like an oval. So I'm going to delete this extra face here. This, hold down Shift, double click. Same thing on this side, and delete it.
Again, I'm still getting the back.
If we were to duplicate this thing and kind of put them like, you know, top to bottom, that it would actually look like a perfect circle without having to move them apart, okay? It may take some tweaking, like I think, you know, don't worry about it on yours, but I think I'd probably pull that point up a little bit back there, but like I said, don't worry about it on yours. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is give this thickness. So how can we take something that is paper thin and give it thickness? Extrude, right? That's all we have to do. So we just hit Control E, and then we can just play with that thickness and maybe go 0.1 or 0.2 depending on your surface.
Do you mean select the whole thing or just
You select the whole thing in object mode, and then it'll do it to the entire thing.
what did you have the thickness for that?
Was that just extrude and then add some thickness? So I'll type 0.1 for thickness. Okay, so now let's say that we wanted let's say that we wanted to have this little lip inside here too, like now attached to this piece, okay? So here's one way that we could do that possibly. Do I want to do that? No, I think I'll do that separately. Just because I don't like how this edge is coming together, my initial thought was I'll put in an edge loop right here, and then I'll go ahead and extrude this, and then just push that in some. But you can see how I'm going to get some weird geometry like on that side. So I probably split it all the way there anyway. Hold on. Let me just give this a try real quick, just to make sure that it wouldn't work. Yeah, I don't know why it's selecting the outside too. Just forget that. Yeah, we'll just make that as a separate piece that we just kind of like nest in there close to it. Cool. Okay, so that part is good then. The next thing we need to do is just add some bevels to this, and that's pretty much that top piece. Okay, so the same thing, we're going to go to edges, and we're just going to grab all of these outside edges all the way around it. This is why I use wireframe, so I can see all the outside edges. Make sure to grab the little edges right here, like right where these two surfaces or two edges meet up. Make sure you grab that edge, and make sure you grab that edge.
Oh wait, are we creating a bubble with that?
Yep,
Okay.
and then you're just going to create a bevel. Now this is going to be for the little lip thing, so that's what we're aiming for right here, is that little lip guy. Hey. Yeah, you're good.
Oh, yeah.
sec. So if I go to my cylinder, I kind of scaled it up so that it fit the width of it. And then I scaled it down this way so that it fit the height. I'll just scoot it down so you can see it better. I added 40 divisions. And then I just deleted all the stuff that I didn't need, right? So I don't need where the opening is, and I don't need where these inner pieces are right here. So I made like a big C. And then you just extrude it to give it thickness, and then you add a bevel.